that'll make it easy.
Yeah, we'll call the special session to order. Time is 4:30. Date is Wednesday, January 8th. We're going to talk about St. Helens tourism events and activities. And I'm going to turn it over to John.
I'll start. Thank you, Mayor. The purpose of this meeting is to talk about the direction of tourism and events and activities. Very often we have reports at most every meeting that are kind of at the end of the meeting and kind of abbreviated, and this is an opportunity to talk more in depth about it. And
Because it's big.
Because it's grown from a place to where it's, we're needing direction at staff level to just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and I think it's most perfected. That's a good thing. So, but why? I'll just go over the agenda real quick. Talking about the purpose of the meeting. I'll talk just a little bit about the history of tourism, to kind of over the last almost 20 years, what we've grown to. Talk about what's going on today, the current programs and activities. How those are funded. The funding is always an important piece of that, and then kind of a wrap up with going forward, some housekeeping issues as far as event management contract and some potential leases and other big events that are underway we want to talk about. So why tourism, and why do we do tourism? It seems to be complicated and messy and very involved, but primarily it's to support local business. That's probably the primary objective. Activating the waterfront has been probably one of the, from my perspective, the driving issue of creating economic vitality down here, and through events and activities on the waterfront. And to speak to that, sidebar to that for a moment, the developers that we've courted and talked to said you can't emphasize the importance of how important it is for them. They're going to come if it's going to be, their success is kind of dependent on what the community brings as far as vitality and events and public art and a lot of things of that nature. So that's also an opportunity to elevate the outside image of St. Helens. We've been a mill town that's kind of converting into something else, and why not be a fun place that's come and visit. So and I'm going to run across the mountaintops here as far as the history of tourism. Forgive me, I have a little rasp in my voice from a cold, but so in 2001, the city, working with the Chamber of Commerce, adopted the transient room lodging tax. That collected a fee on all the hotel room fees, and that the hotels, at that time there wasn't Airbnb, but anything, RV parks, anything that was a short overnight stay, anything less than 30 days, you paid that percentage. The state has a fee, the city has a fee. And that was basically, the city and the chamber worked together for several years. They created a plan, get some grant funds from Travel Oregon, created towards sustainable tourism, and that's kind of been the guiding document ever since. And it's really a pretty good plan. And the city and chamber created this tourism committee. We had a tourism committee which had a paid director, and the director had the board worked not so much in events and activities. They did some, excuse me. The primary mission of the tourism committee was to collect money for a convention center. That was kind of they did some small events. They had a grant program of about $10,000 a year. But really nothing to the scale. They didn't do much with Halloween or 13 Nights or 4th of July or the Christmas ships or anything like that. It's a pretty limited. They didn't do the Maritime Festival and some other things, but the director was paid. And that went along, I can't say fairly well and without controversy, because there seemed to be perpetual controversy and lots of directors coming and going, and it was kind of it was working, but something perpetually kind of not working about it too. So in 2015, the group stopped meeting and then eventually disbanded, and that the function of the tourism committee went to the city council, and the city council designated staff through the community development department to lead tourism, and we have been doing that ever since. And through that effort, we've hired E2C, or we went out for a third-party contract to manage events. We've focused a lot of energy on events, and it's really broadly been pretty successful. And I mentioned before, the 13 nights and 4th of July and all those things didn't happen under the old tourism. And all of those through, I'm getting a nod, but it came and went at some point.
They started before that, just a smaller scale.
The foundation was there. I mean, the foundation played a role in a couple of those events, but everything's kind of gravitated back to the city for the lack of, I don't know, it's a lot of work, frankly. And volunteerism is really difficult, and even today, everybody that produces these events is paid in some fashion. So, I wanted to talk about, some of you have way more experience on this than I do. I know Keith's been with it the whole time practically, so if I missed anything, major milestone, you can take a bite and answer.
But yeah, it was a lot of work, and it took a lot of volunteers, and yeah.
It seems like the volunteers have kind of faded away, and
Well, it takes, I was doing almost all the events, and it's a full-time job. And so couldn't do that without a full-time person.
So I had to get a history lesson on it when I came in because it was very controversial. And I think Tina would be number 5 on directors in the last about every 2 years. That sound about right, Keith?
Well, some lasted longer than that. It was.
Well, there was
but
Amber
the
did.
big controversy was that we weren't doing events.
Yes.
And that was kind of part of the reason why I was over the foundation, so I took over the events, the foundation took over the events. But everybody thought that, well, tourism should be doing that. That wasn't our goal at the time.
One of my perceptions of coming onto the council was that there was a lot of internal friction on the tourism committee, and it got to a point to where it was absolutely non-functional and almost impractical to get anything done because of the bickering and the just ineffectiveness of doing anything, accomplishing a lot of things. So when it was taken over by the council, and the council kind of asked our community development director to oversee what tourism was, and I think it's been very effective since then, internally with the staff and with how it functions. So I see it as a more efficient tool, the way it's been functioning in the last couple of years. We still have a lot of work to do with it, and that's my perception.
A lot of it is community itself, because everybody has their own idea of what tourism is. And also, a lot of people thought that we would never have any tourism here, so it was a uphill battle the whole time.
Well, one of the things that I left out was the budgetary issues, and I think that citizens came to us about regarding the tourism committee and why is it so far in debt. And there was a huge debt when we took it over. So that
So I
means
know John's gonna get into the funding mechanism of it and why we spend money on tourism. So I'm gonna turn it back over to John.
okay, yeah, and I intended to talk about how we, through the hiring a third-party contractor to take what is $100,000 of hotel money and turn it into almost a $300,000 program. But I wanted to talk about the current programs and activities if we're following the agenda here, and I'll get back to that. So I would like to turn it over to Tina Curry to,
Well, to talk about what we're doing
what
right
we're doing right now, yeah.
Okay, so, clearly, you know, the gorilla in the room is Halloween Town and how many people that brings to town and has for the last 4 years. So what we're trying to do right now is build offshoots to get people to come here year-round. And by tying all of our programs together, Halloween Town, 13 Nights on the River, 4th of July, the Christmas celebration, new last year was a Mardi Gras street party, and getting the merchants involved and everything else, what that's allowed us to do is to bundle programs that are attractive to our sponsors and keeping merchants and partners within the county, like the new Salmonberry Lake property. We're working on the Rose Garden, the Sand Island camping promotion. I talked with Brad. He said 88% of his people came from out of town this year. We know that's a direct result of the social media that we do and the sponsorship that happens because he did not do any advertising on his own, and he does not even go on social media. So we know that we're getting a reach that is, you know, extensive. And we're trying to build on that. And one of the new things that we're doing is a new Explore Local app, which is going to give us billing through Vancouver, extensively in Vancouver and Portland for all of our businesses in town. They're going to get absolutely free listings and with photos, and they have a landing spot where they can put their own information on it so that when people come from out of town, they will go to which just this week we got the final for redoing Discover Columbia County, which is a website that I developed with E2C and gave to the city. And that site, this is up to 700,000 visitors now. And so we are trying to focus concentration on aspects in branding so that people don't have to find 15 different websites to go to. They'll be able to go to one site. I met with Casey today, and he's very interested in tying what he's doing into that site. And then all of the cities within Columbia County are also featured on that site.
So Casey being the guy, Casey over
Garrett.
the county.
Yeah. And that site is also a complete free resource for all nonprofits for any city function, events, anything like that is going on. And businesses will be able to promote something that they want for 60 days for $25, which is a huge deal for letting people know when we have as much traffic as we do coming to that site. The other thing that we're working on are summer activities. We're wanting to start a whole kite program here, so that would be volunteer-driven and perhaps retail-driven by having a kite shop or someone that wants to have kites within their shop, where we invest in some of the assets of the big kites that are super fun to watch, and they can get loaned out to people to use because they're not trick kites or anything like that. We're also working on attracting Sand Island camping, but also river rides. So people will be able to go on rides down the river. As a launching point, it would be the Sand Island docks. And that would be kind of in a partnership with them for additional revenues. We also want to, we got donated all of the assets from the Haunted Mansion to the city. So we want to move that to the Masonic Ballroom. And in the top floors, because I don't think people realize, we do surveys with people coming from town and why they want to come to town. And one of the top reasons is because there's a haunted house here. So that's why you see lines out the door, and it's super busy from, for the 6 weeks during Halloween, basically. So that would be a very negative thing in my mind if we lost the haunted house. And so I'm hoping that we can bring that to the bottom floor of the Masonic Ballroom, as well as have a welcome riverfront development, kind of like kiosk, but inside with photos of what's coming, who to contact if you're interested in being here or running a business. And in the upstairs, we want to do an escape room, keep the museums up there for the aliens and the oddities, and also have a business incubator so that businesses that think they might want to move down to First Street could be there for 60 days rent-free, following certain parameters that they qualified for. And that would be year-round. So we would be promoting this year-round. Besides, just like with Sand Island, we got these people to come here, we would be promoting, obviously, other reasons to visit St. Helens, whether it's like to come and play with a kite that you didn't think you could afford, or to go on a kayak ride or take a free shuttle across to the island and check it out if you've never been there before, or do, escape rooms and that kind of thing. And also promoting specifically to corporate clients that are always constantly looking for things to do for their managers, owners, salespeople, marketing people, and guests from out of town. So we're hoping that we could promote that directly to the corporate clients. So that probably would not be media driven. That would be more message and personal contact driven, as would the initial with the Explore Local program. So there's a lot of things that are kind of in the hopper that I'm working on, and I don't know whether I can open this to anybody, if you allow that or not, but maybe some of the merchants that are here would want to, just share any experiences that they might have. I don't know whether we have time for that, but.
Let's get through what John's got, and
Okay.
then we can have some, if people want to give some testimony, we'll
Yeah.
go there, okay?
That sounds good.
Yeah, that way we have everything
Yeah.
laid out. If they hear something they want to hit on next.
So working in tourism and operated by the city is, not without its challenges. And working under public funds and in the funding process and working budget laws and, things that come up are really hard to be flexible and adapt to. And it's all for good reason, but the tourism fund, from the public speak here, is a special revenue fund, which is different than a enterprise fund like a water utility or your sewer, which has to basically act like its own enterprise and business, and it's more like an enterprise fund and less like the general fund dollars that are your taxes and fees that are collected that go to pay for police and.
What that means is only those tourism dollars are paid by the people who rent the hotel, and they go into a pool of money. In that pool of money, you cannot pave streets. This gets asked to me a number of times, and I patiently do explain, but we have media here, so I'm trying to explain it very simple, that you cannot spend that money on anything other than tourism, and we can only spend a small fraction that goes towards administration, which John oversees Tina. So we get a very small portion of that, very small of that. The rest of it has to be 100% on events that bring people in from outside the area. It has to be an event that brings people from outside the area.
Does that mean events or equipment?
Events, equipments,
Okay.
anything related to that.
Okay.
Yes. So I just wanted to make that very clear, because I get, why are you guys spending all this money in Halloween Town and we need sidewalks? I'm like, hey, I gotta tell you, that money is it's an own pool of money. It cannot be touched by the city. Can't. It cannot, for the streets and paint and whatever we want to do. Paint lines, can't do it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back to equipment. Can it be permanent, tourism equipment versus, or just temporary permanent?
Oh, you can buy
No,
equipment.
we buy equipment.
No, the reason I'm saying, or putting this out, is I could think of a couple of things that people could say, well, that's the cities, which could be used for other things.
Guess,
Example?
Example, let's put a dock in.
That's pretty spendy, Steve.
I didn't say, don't worry about that. But I got a dock that I bought with tourism because it helps people here, but I can do other things off that dock. Is that allowed? That's the question.
So St. Helens is in a very unique place because we adopted our ordinance prior to 2002, or 2002 or 3. Anyway, we predated the restrictions that go onto tourism spending dollars. Currently, it's split, 70% has to go to marketing and promotion, and up to 30% of those funds can be kept in-house for administrative expenses. We don't have that restriction. So there's a whole litany of legislation that comes and goes about, all the demand for police services and paving roads and all those communities that are over tourism that need help, basically, to meet those needs, and no, they can't do it. They can only do marketing, promotion, and those types of things, but we can, theoretically, although the revenues to support something like a dock, just, that'd be more along the lines of saving for a convention center, I suspect, but.
Well, help answer that question from my perspective. The mission of the tourism at first was, you heard it, was to create a hotel and a specific environment so that we could have tourism. That was the mission. That was the mission to start with. So you said something about a facility that would be permanent. Okay, and I'm bringing up an example of what tourism, how it was founded, because they wanted a place to meet.
an event center. is what
An
it's
event
called.
center.
But does that still stand? Because a dock is equivalent to a hotel. It's big, it's a lot of money.
So,
The ORS is really specific about what is, it specifically says convention centers. And I think it's more about Portland's convention center
Yeah.
than anything St. Helens is.
Okay, so it's not about equipment, it's about very specific things. Okay. That was the question.
So, other events, this special revenue collects revenue from transient lodging fees, which are the 10% that anybody pays on a hotel or short-term rental, RV park, or campground. And along with, which that totals about $100,000 a year, which may or may not seem like a lot of money, but if that's all we had to work with, we wouldn't be sitting around this table right now. More than likely, it would be just, doing the admin costs and a few little grants would be gone pretty quick. And so the transit lodging revenues, the event revenues themselves, some of these events have fees and parking revenues and things of that nature. Those are collected into that fund, and then B2C is also charged with, developing sponsorships, kind of packaging things together. And there's been a few grants that we've done that are managed through this fund, but as far as the finding grant runs through this account. So on the budget structure, here where ETC is being paid to produce the events. Each major event has a budget. ETC produces the event, the expenses are charged to the event, and the revenues are all accounted for. Voice is cracking. And the council's been real specific that, with their strategy, that total revenues need to cover total expenses. We're going to break even, essentially. And, and that's a good thing. We're working the money. Basically, we're getting the money in, we're working it and leveraging it, but we don't want to slip backwards. It's kind of what we've heard. And that's not the only measure of success, is breaking even, for sure. It doesn't really tell the whole story. There's indirect and direct ways to kind of measure success. Number of visitors out of towns, the visitor spending, of elevating community awareness. St. Helens is on the map now. I mean, if you go to Halloween, we're top 3 in the country for, probably the world, because come to find out other countries don't do Halloween as, so we may have a further reach than that, but, yeah, it's kind of.
It's kind of amazing when I'm outside of here and representing the city and I say I'm Mayor Scholl, Halloween Town.
That's the thing, right? You're the city that has Halloween.
I've been there. My wife loves Halloween. You know, that type of conversation is kind of amazing.
So in total, you know, the investments that we're leveraging and working this money have brought a lot of value to the community and surrounding regions. But, you know, St. Helens on the map, it's put Oregon on the map. The hotel revenues don't really tell the story because we run out of capacity so quickly. You know, so many people are flying to Oregon, they're staying in hotels as close as they can get, and they're not in St. Helens because it's either not nice enough for what they want to stay in, or
They're full.
Or they're full.
They're full.
They're usually full already too, and so we're turning those away and you know, trying to develop some Airbnb type short-term rental opportunities for the people that might want to do that. And so that's there's
Pretty much the overview.
pretty much the overview of how financially how tourism works. So, yeah, one of the next steps on the list are, talking about. UC is currently working without a contract. We didn't. We renewed to last year's. Haven't had any direction from council. The haunted house issue, the success of the Plymouth Pub, which is probably in part due to some of the tourism activity here, is also shares that space with what was the haunted house, and they need
They
that space.
wanted it.
They need that space for expansion, so they're moving them out. So they're homeless, and I don't know the whole story about where they're going, but
Well, they're not going anywhere.
Okay.
So if we do not take over the haunted house, it is not going to occur as it has in the last 4 years. The person that was running the haunted house would continue to run it, however, the city would own that asset. So all revenues would go through the city. And then we would, of course, as usual, become responsible for making it happen and making it feasible and keeping it on track. It has an excellent financial footprint from the last 3 years, so it's not a guess of what they do in revenue. I think the revenue would actually increase because we're planning on doing, with your approval, virtual reality and the other things that I mentioned earlier within that location to bring people from out of town that want to experience things once they come to town. That's always what I heard when I was in the museum. They would be like, well, what else is down here? What do you do? And where, besides being not open a lot of times on Sundays especially, people come to town because they're just driving around, and then it's like they really don't have anything to do. So I would be like, well, have you eaten? So I'd be listing the restaurants they could at least eat at. But other than movies and restaurants, there's not a lot of weekend activities that people can participate in besides hiking. So if they came with little kids, they weren't doing that because it was just, not
To
feasible.
recap, what you're asking is, we are being gifted, if we want, the haunted house materials.
Correct.
And we also have the ability to lease the bottom half of the Mason building, which we currently lease the top right now. Are we still in that lease? Or
We're
was that
not,
years out?
we're not. I just did it for the month of October this past year.
So, but that's the ask, is because you
Yes.
have to have a place to move the haunted
Correct.
house stuff.
Yes.
And you feel that it's already been proven?
I think it has a proven track record. We should be able to, at a minimum, cover expenses. That would be at a minimum. But I think losing the haunted mansion or some facsimile thereof would be like a step back, because people do drive around from one haunted house to the next, to the next, to the next. And I don't know, maybe,
I agree, I believe we should have 300 houses. They would all be full.
yes, they would.
So,
So
That
the
building would also
the
be-
issue is that you would need to, this is the issue. Okay, it's not that we can't afford to pay for it with Halloween funds. The problem is, the Halloween funds don't come until October. So we need money to, get it going, get it set up, rent the space, et cetera, to facilitate us opening our doors. Even though we want to open them within 60 days, we still, the bulk of the cash would probably come in September and October. So it's about fronting money, because
Yeah, I
I
get
spend
that.
pretty much every dollar that I raise to
I get
make.
why she's here is because we had to, first few years filling it out, we had to keep doing an intergovernment loan
Yeah.
out of tourism, which was tourism money, it was just an upfront loan. And you're asking for a budget cycle to do that again this year.
Right.
Or,
I mean, Halloween is in the black, but the thing is that it's not enough to support it through the year, for the whole year, until September.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And the owner of the building wants to lock into a year lease again,
3,
3-year.
but we countered with 2 years, so that we
Countered with
at
2.
least would have that.
And the price is,
I think it's 3,500 for the top and bottom for the whole year. I mean, you renegotiated a little bit,
not
so,
3,500 for the whole year,
no,
no.
yeah.
Gonna say, sold!
It's 3,000 a month,
Plus a commitment to some improvements, so,
yeah.
3,000 a month with some minor improvements,
building improvements, yeah.
okay?
The stairway going up to the top level, that's the whole building, both floors. Because the top floor has the alien experience and
We have a lot of businesses, owners out here in the downtown area, I see, so I would like to maybe open it up for some comment. If you could state your name, the mics will pick you up. If you would like to make a comment or have something to add or questions, now's the time, but just state your name for the record so Kathy can get it. Go ahead, Jennifer. I know you, but you still have to state your name.
Jennifer Pugsley, and I am one of the owners of 50 Plaza Square. We've been selling real estate here for over 40 years, and one of the reasons we wanted to come down and be part of this is because of this tourism. There's a lot of talk within the local real estate industry that St. Helens is now the it girl, so to speak. It's because this tourism. Tina was kind enough to loan us the mayor's costume during Halloween Town.
The evil mayor's costume, by the way.
The other guy. So people could come into our office and photograph with it. It was super interesting. Next year, we want to have a map where we can mark where people were coming from. We had people from Kentucky honeymooning here during Halloween Town. They weren't coming here on the way to somewhere else. They were coming here specifically. We had Australia, we had Virginia, we had Tennessee, a lot of people from Washington. England, we had one. So it was super interesting for us to see what's happening down here. We have talk a lot about the Christmas event that we feel like we're in a Hallmark movie. We're able to pass that on to people that are coming into our office. A little off of that, I want to mention that please don't underestimate that historic preservation equals tourism too. And I'm not here on behalf of the Historic Society, but there has been some discussion where we can have maybe interactive signage
Sure.
all around town for that. We have an incredible walking tour, so there are things that are happening. Tina's been really gracious to come and meet with our group, and so I didn't hear her mention that, but she's doing a lot of things behind the scenes that are super interesting. But we are here because of that, so.
I'd like to hear that, thank you.
My name is Brady Preheim. I don't have a business downtown. I do live in town. I have a little bit of history because I was actually the chair of the chamber when the chamber had the tourism contract and turned it back to the city. It wasn't like it took it back, we gave it back because we didn't have the staffing, because we had no director, and didn't think that we could continue with that contract. And I can tell you that prior to Tina coming along, that money was spent every year, we just got nothing out. And we spent it, when I was there, by the time I was there, it had been going on at the chamber, and basically we paid for a person who then had no budget to do anything, and that was about it. As far as Halloween Town, I mean, again, I think you have a little bit underestimated the fact that we are number 3. Martha Stewart said this is the number 3 place in the country for Halloween Town. The fact that St. Helens is number 3 on anything except unemployment is like amazing. I mean, who would have thought 10 years ago that we could be number 3 on anything in the country? And as you said, it's probably the world, because not a lot of other people are doing it. And clearly, whatever magic that ETC can do that has created Halloween Town, it sort of is like the Midas touch, and everything that happens seems to turn to gold, and it's like, whatever we need to do to continue in supporting and encouraging that, I don't see how we can say no to those projects, because it has a proven track record. It's not like it's unknown about what happens. It's pretty clear that when we invest in tourism, and especially Halloween Town, it comes back twofold, or threefold, or tenfold. So it's pretty clear to me that that is a direction that the city needs to go.
My name is Joanna Story, and I own Joe's Grub Shack and Bakery. It's a food cart. And I'm on the end that this is my livelihood, and Tina's made it possible. I do 13 nights, and I do Halloween Town, and the 4th of July, donate to the veterans. But I'm just amazed at how many people come to me, especially during Halloween Town, from Florida, and they've only come here for that reason. And we had people from England this year. You know, they all want us to know, we came here and we're from Europe, and they're excited. And it's a lot of work, being down there and doing what I do, but it's also a lot of fun. And it's my livelihood, so I'm all for it. Keep it going.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to hear from the councilors. Councilor Topaz, you have a comment?
Yes. I don't like it as a mainstay. It's a facet that should be kept going, but we need what I'm gonna call heavyweight jobs, rather than, it's nice that we have some pickle shops and places where people get burgers and go around and get scared, but that doesn't really put money in our pocket all the way around. The fact that it's limited tourism, the dollars come in and go out there, it doesn't go beyond it. We need something beyond that. That's one of the reasons I brought up using some of the money I could see it as tourism, building docks, so we had other ways of building the town, not a single way. If this was Disneyland and the whole business, everything here was only tourism, then it'd be another story, but it isn't. I think we have to be a little realistic. Getting people to wander through here, spend a little bit of money and go away is not the same as coming here and doing business. So let's not get overexcited that this is super great and the answer to all of our problems. It is great, but it's only one thing. We shouldn't get blindsided that this is the best and only thing to do. The fact that, mentioning the docks and the fact that there's a state rules of what we can do, basically the state's starting to make us look like little Portland. In fact, a lot of the state rules make all the little towns like little Portland and don't give us our individuality. And that bothers me, because we're a different town than anybody else. We've got to remember that. We've got to try to keep our own pride in our own direction. And make-believe, which is what tourism is to a great extent, at least with the Halloween Town and some of that, is just that, it's make-believe. That's what bothers me.
Councilor Locke.
My only comment is I think Halloween Town is great, but I think we need to focus on getting more realistic stuff so that when people come, they're super impressed. And they have more things to do also, because yes, they need to stay busy the whole day, or maybe even the whole weekend. Because if you travel across from the other side of the world, you want to stay busy a while.
Councilor Carson.
To kind of depart from the Halloween piece, because a lot of people are like, Halloween, it's only a month, it's only a month. I've watched, because I live within walking distance here, I've watched the foot traffic double and triple in August and in July, which has nothing to do with Halloween. And I've watched all the shops that were empty fill up, and they would have emptied out right after Halloween if it was just about Halloween. The restaurant had to expand because it didn't have enough refrigerator space, because they're busy when it's not Halloween, so it's not just about October. And I'm torn when I go to League of Oregon cities and ask other communities, how did you grow? And it's like, you have to provide a community where workers want to live. And that is part of economic development and attracting big businesses with jobs to come here. Because we have to have a community where their employees want to live. And if you have rundown streets and empty storefronts, that's not any place where a business wants to locate. They want to locate to a vibrant community. So building our Main Street has been a focus of this council for the last 15 years, with Main Street, with revitalization, with urban renewal, and
Various
with tourism.
grants,
All
various-
of those different
various
things
grants, too.
all speak to revitalizing Main Street and getting our local businesses back together. And it's like, you know, if I learned one thing as I've watched mill after mill close, is hitching our wagon to one big job developer or job provider is not always the best plan for sustainability as a community. And this tourism is not the magic bullet that's gonna solve everything in St. Helens, but it's at least a start. That's just one tool in our arsenal. And, you know, it's for me, for my money, for my investment, it's had a pretty good return on what we've done. And it's like, you put a lot of bait in the water, and some things, sometimes you get stuff, sometimes you don't. And it's, by all means, it's not enough, but it's at least something that is bringing return on investment. I can't find a single retail business in town that's not happy with tourism and not happy with the increased customer traffic. I think that's good. I think a good litmus test for me is watching what's happened to what was a tree lighting of 300 people 5 years ago, and now it's over 1,000, 2,000 people out there for Christmas ships. And the first year I did it, it was 350 people. It was a nothing. You didn't have to close any streets for that event. And it's the same Christmas dinner, it's the same Christmas ships, but it's the presence that this area has now, where people on a Tuesday will come down to just look and to just be in the space. And I think that's the placemaking that sustainable tourism has done. I think it's definitely worth the investment, worth the conversation about where we go forward from here. But it's about building beyond, because I think having volunteered every year in Halloween, having served on tourism committee, I believe that Halloween's kind of at that point where it's kind of a sustainability deal. And now it's about growing the other events like the Mardi Gras Street Party, like the Christmas ships, and about strengthening some of the other events on our calendar. So there is always something to do in St. Helens, no matter what we can, no matter what study there's always worthwhile things to do. And I think that this haunting position has
Haunting
tools.
proposition?
Yeah, has a possibility that maybe that could be one of those things that's gonna give people something to do in March, or something for people to do on those long rainy weeks that we get in the springtime.
Okay, thank you. Council President Morton.
Well, for the past 12 years, I've had the honor of serving the city on the council. And when I first came on the council, the city was in trouble because Boise was about to shut down. Reason Lumber went away. all the lumber industries were leaving, that were based on the timber industry. So the questions with the council was, what are we going to do? And this went back and forth for several years. So got to remember that this was 12, 13 years ago. What are we going to do? What's the council going to do? We going to try and get in bed with some corporation and try to bring it here and try to do it? That doesn't work for council people. It just doesn't work. We can't go off to China somewhere and get wheeled and dealed like some individuals are doing in some cities and try to bring those corporations back. We don't do that. We've got to figure something out to help our economy. Well, I've always felt that the personality of a city and a town is made up of their small businesses. Their in-service businesses creates a community. That's the economics of a community. Sometimes when you have put all your money into something like Boise, and then they pull the plug, what do you have? Well, I tell you, that's been really tough, because now the citizens have to pick up the higher water and sewer prices, the utility prices, everything goes up. The tax base goes away all of a sudden, just like that. So what the city did was saying, okay, what can we do? And tourism started to, it was a dirty, dirty word in this town when I was there. Tourism doesn't pay the bills. Tourism is, well, like Mr. Topaz said, you're just blindsided. Well, I have a different opinion, and I couldn't agree more with Councilor Carlson with her expose of what has happened over her 6 years. And I think, from my point of view, this town is exciting to be in because we are starting to feel some vitality and some life and some culture about our community. And it's because of, guess who? The children. That's who we've reached out to, just like Walt Disney did. And ironically, Disney made this film about Halloween Town for kids. And then so we kind of like somehow picked up on that. It was by dumb luck.
They filmed the movie here. I can't believe how dare they.
Exactly, so we pick up on that and we do a Halloween Town thing. Oh my heavens. And what's it turned into? Unbelievable worldwide recognition. And so, there's success at that just during October. But there's more successes out there that are untapped. And does tourism pay the bills? Well, I'll tell you, when I retired, I was very fortunate and got to travel to 5 continents. Every city that I went through, and I always asked, what's your main industry? It was tourism, 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 tourism. I kept hearing it over and over again. Maybe it was because I went to large city or beautiful cities that I wanted to visit, but it was always about tourism. Tourism does pay the bills. Tourism is a big industry. And people who are in tourism do not have blinders on. They have their eyes wide open, looking around to figure out what's going to draw people into the community. And that's how you create a culture. So I've said enough, and it was my turn. I did not go against what you said, but if you want to say something about what I said or Jenny said, so be it.
The problems I see with tourism is our state law, that we can't use the money from that other places. That's one of the big hangups. No matter how much money comes in, it's got to get stuck in tourism.
Oh, it doesn't get stuck in tourism, Mr. Topaz. It goes right to the business owners, and you know that as well as I do.
Yep.
No. I'm talking about how do we keep the city going?
Steve, so I,
The
time
a
out.
restaurant doesn't give you that much taxes as compared to an industry or a corporate headquarters. And the way the state law has, and we have to admit, we've got some strange state laws, keeps our tourism dollars locked up in a kind of a small area. Now, I didn't say get rid of tourism, I said be careful of it. If you go to Athens, Greece, tourism is a big thing. So is the banking and the other stuff that's happening in Athens, but nobody talks about that. We need something that we don't talk about that still brings money here.
Go get it, Steve.
Okay.
I want to see what it is.
Okay, counselors.
I'm sorry.
Yes,
To the agenda.
yep, so, now it's my turn to respond.
That's right. We forgot about the mayor. Love it. Sorry, I got long-winded, and I apologize.
Tourism is a big deal. I mean, it is recognized. You go over to Bend and you look at that area, we just had our league over there. And,
Don't compare us to Bend.
It is.
Don't do that.
Well, no, it is a big deal over there. I mean,
Oh, it
you
is.
wanna-
Yes,
you
it
wanna
is.
talk about some money. You go over there and you stay in any hotel and you get on your Facebook site and they have already targeted you. You will see advertisement for ATVs to hiking to everything. They have targeted you the minute you show up. And I really applaud you for how far you have brought in this, Tina. And this is not kissing up or anything, but it's taking it off our plate, and you've done wonders with it. I really liked what I was hearing about advertisement on the Discover Columbia County site. $25 is really cheap, really, really cheap. So it's definitely affordable. It serves our community. There was some talk here about Florida, people from Florida 2 years ago. We had all the main actors here. And I also applaud you for going outside of that and going to the Twilight this year theme, which drew quite a bit of people to
Yeah.
here. I think that was very, very smart. We had some issues with actors that were a certain classification because they have ratings that thought they were worth more than what they were, if we're going to be blunt and honest. And you just said, okay, we're going to go a different route, and it worked out. So, there was 7 people here from Florida. There was a couple and an adult girl and their 4 kids. And it was on a Thursday, and they were at the haunted house, as a matter of fact. And Chris announced that, hey, I was just checking to see how things were going with him. And he goes, they found out I was mayor. They were very excited to meet the real mayor of St. Helens. It was kind of weird, but, and we got to talking, and they just loved it. They had been here for a day prior, and they were inquiring about something to eat, and I said, well, the Klondike was open at the time. I said, that's really good food, but if you want a kid-friendly place, Sunshine Pizza, you know, my kids love it. They have a little arcade up there because we had the 4 little ones, and you can be loud, and you could, just relax at Sunshine. And I told them best salad bar in town, by the way. But I was just amazed, and then they were going to, the next day, go up to the Multnomah Falls. So they weren't, they were out here really looking, and their main thing was to come here for Halloween Town, and they didn't care that they had just missed all the actors. I showed them pictures of me because I got a picture with all 4 of us in the old courthouse, and they're like, it's cool. It definitely does. The dollars that we spend are probably about, I think, 4 times come back into the community, at least. By those people traveling out here, staying at the Best Western, eating at McDonald's, and then the Klondike or the Sunshine Pizza. So it is a huge economic driver, and you do a lot more than just Halloween Town. I like the Fairy Festival's kind of, which we were hoping it would have been better, but it wasn't. People are laughing. I could hear them out there. Mardi Gras, I think I'd like to see you pursue that. I thought that was good, other than a little bit of street closure issue that was, that you're working on. I understand you had a meeting with merchants down here trying to figure out parking, and us being a little bit more clearer. There will be 5 weekends of Halloween Town. Prior to the 31st, the 5 following weekends will be closed down here. I just want that to be known right now, because people think that we did it a week early this year, and it wasn't. It's what we do. We know that, you've informed us, this year is no different. So I'd like to see the Mardi Gras. We actually dumped Halloween, or 4th of July onto her. We took it over the first year, and we said, okay, it's yours. So that wasn't part of the original contract, and we thank you for taking that over, because it's a little bit of work.
Just a little bit.
Yes, so,
A smidge.
yep. So, as far as the issue at hand, basically the ask is, I like the idea that you can reach out to the Historical Society, that space could be utilized for future merchants, nonprofits, and the Halloween Town event, and other needs along the way.
Yeah.
So, I think it's definitely, if you have the numbers, and you think you're gonna break even, I'm okay with. So we go through budget every year, and we're like, we can't keep transferring this over, and you did what we asked you. You are completely, there's no transfer would be needed, but this is something that's monumental.
It wasn't in the budget.
That wasn't in the
when we-
budget.
When we did the
So-
budget last June.
So when it comes that time, and we have basically one individual who continues to come down here and inquire about funding for tourism, and she'll write multiple letters in the editor about it. That's what this is in regards to. So.
Can the budget be put in the bank? Or does it have to be spent within that year?
Be put in the bank, yes.
It can be put in the bank.
Yes.
So if we spent $3, got $9, and we could put $4 in the bank to use ahead of time.
You could.
Okay, that was okay.
Yeah, it rolls. It's not like it goes away at the end of the year. It rolls.
That was the question.
It's not like use it or spend it or.
Yeah, but,
lose it.
so as any business person would understand, you slowly grow your business, and I think tourism is no
Yeah,
different.
but we got state law, that's where the question
Yeah.
came from. Squirrely is squirrely.
So tourism is no different, that you continue to grow it. If you don't grow, you go. So,
That was part of the original thing when we did it, was our main intent was to build a convention center. So we were saving money. That's why what we were spending on tourism was very limited, because we kept saving money
Well,
for
as
a
I say,
center.
seeing the way the state has changed some of the rules, whether we could still build a bank account. So you don't have to borrow from the city, there's
We can.
our bank account.
We got grandfathered in because we set our rules before they set their rules.
Okay, that was the question.
Well, it's really an issue about timing.
Yeah.
It's how the fiscal year rolls versus the events roll out on a different calendar from.
But it doesn't matter when your year ends and when it begins. If you have a budget for the year, you have a budget for the year.
Right.
It's not the first year we've done this. So, I mean, we kind of know how it's gonna go. It's this opportunity with the haunted place was not there when we began the year, so it couldn't have been in our allocation at the beginning of the year.
Right.
But if it wasn't for the haunted thing, it would be the regular year as always.
Yes, those unanticipated things,
That were not any fault of ours.
not contemplated in the budget, yep.
so,
So like the money that I raise over and above what E2C gets paid, I raise, probably another $265,000 a year. And I spend 100% of that money on activities relating to all of the events that happen, whether it's buying advertising or website development, social media, props and assets and everything else. I mean, that's a really tiny amount. It might sound like a big number, but it really is like a little tiny number. And so we've gradually been building assets and things like that so that we're not starting at ground zero anymore. And we can, you know, in my mind, I'm risk adverse, so I'm constantly saying, okay, what would be my loser scenario if I was totally off base? Could I cover that? And that has been the way that I have been working on tourism and using the dollars that we raise. So the sponsors and the people that visit are the ones that are paying for tourism. You know, it's not coming out of a check from the city or anybody else. It's coming directly from visitors that pay fees and from sponsors that help us make it happen. Just so, I think that's kind of something that people don't really realize, is how much money we're generating so that we can hire people to come and light the pumpkin, or we can hire a band for a Mardi Gras street party. And we do have a sound system that works. And, you know, 13 Nights is another big thing that happens during the summer that takes a lot of volunteerism, but also just demanding of time because it's every week. So it's not like you can just go off on vacation. So we've been able to bring 13 Nights into the black as well, just with, you know, changing some of the paradigms that make it profitable. Because when you're selling $5 beers and that pays for everything except for your sponsors, it's tough to make that money work and not be in the hole. That's why the Community Foundation would always say, can you please pay our insurance? Because it's really super tough to make the money work at $5 for beer. So,
You know, I believe I think the first year we had tourism, there was no budget, period. But then we decided to bring a director on. And even then, I think we started at $20,000 was our first budget. So hiring a director with $20,000 and doing anything kind of ties your hands a little bit.
Yeah, I imagine it would have. I mean,
Yeah.
okay, well, so I guess a general census, do we want to put this on our, I guess we just put it on our regular session, couldn't we, Kathy? For agenda items to renew the contract with EC, so I want to get a census, council, yeah? Put it on the agenda,
Put it on the agenda.
okay? And then
Renew or put out for bid.
I would like personally renew. I don't think.
If it goes on the agenda, why can't it be both? You know, obviously, we've got a time sequence, which is very helpful, but putting it out for bid gets rid of a lot of bad taste around the town.
Well, so we drug our feet on this as a council because she's working without a contract right now.
Well, mistakes are mistakes, but it's still
So,
continuum.
I would like to just put it on our agenda or our regular session just to approve, personally. That's my census on it. Anybody else?
We did an RFP 2 years ago. Had some very interesting proposals that came back.
But you don't have to accept them, but it does clear the air. It's a little more work, but it clears the air.
It's a long process.
I know.
Get
We've got a
those
lot
out.
of bad taste in the town, too.
Well, we had a lady come all the way from Chicago, fly in and wanted to do the thing. And so, I mean, it was, it was time consuming. Did we have to put her up or buy her travel on that? No? She paid for that on her own?
Yep. That's what people
So, I mean, it creates an enormous amount of time, so if we're going to do that, we've got to allocate several months at least to to get that,
All
to
right.
get those things out and then come
What-
back, and then we've got to figure a system to
Everything
interview
is done the
people.
easiest way, you get in trouble.
So here's what I'm thinking. Let's just, for me personally, we extend it for this year, we'll put it out for RFP and get on it early. You're gonna be here for the next 2 more years, get on it early and put it out for RFP. He's not even working under a contract right now. Who would like to be reaching out, doing these merchant, and not trying to make this grow? Obviously, we dumped 4th of July honor, which was not part of the contract. We got that as a bonus. We did. It wasn't part of it.
Well, that was gonna be my suggestion, is we do it next year, because it is gonna take a lot of time to get ready for it.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's a good suggestion, Mayor. I'm impressed. Good suggestion, because I think that compromises what Mr. Topaz has to say, and maybe what some citizens feel, that, that this is like a backdoor deal. It's not a backdoor deal. It's something that we're left with.
Yep.
And we did. I do agree that we kind of let things go when we could have gone out for an RFP. But at this point, I think it's too late. I really.
It's a backdoor deal, whether it's late or not, it's a backdoor.
I don't think so.
I know that, you just said so, I heard you say that, but in fact it is. If you're gonna have a renewable contract, you have to have a renewable system, and this is not a renewable contract. But I agree that we put it up, and ironclad, we do it next year.
Contract is
Councilor
renewable.
Topaz, I do not like your comment that you
I
just.
know that, I don't care, it's my opinion.
I'm trying to speak right now.
That's
My
fine,
opinion.
that's fine.
You don't like anything this city does. I don't even know why you ran to be a counselor, personally.
Because I don't like what the city's doing, that's why I ran.
Personally. So, you have not brought anything to the table. You're more than welcome to put one thing,
Okay,
put
keep
anything on
going.
the agenda you want, but you've never reached out. So,
Okay,
definitely not a backdoor deal. I do not like, that is
okay.
not true, and you are assuming things that are wrong. And
You haven't heard what
representing
I've
the city.
assumed yet, so
You are
don't tell me what I've
representing
assumed.
the city, and I wish you would act more like an adult and represent our citizens better.
I'm representing our citizens, I'm not representing the city or the council, I'm representing citizens. So I'm dealing with what people tell me on the street.
So, Morton, your census is yes, put it on for our regular session.
Yes.
Councilor Locke?
Yep.
Councilor Carlson? Myself, yes?
So, yeah.
You're in
With the
favor?
caveat that we go out next year.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that was a
That's
good
correct.
suggestion.
Okay. The other issue is getting into a lease contract with Elliott Michael for the Mason Building. So I'm a yes on that,
I'm okay with it.
okay?
I'm okay.
It's only 2 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm okay.
More details.
I have to clarify that. I'm okay with hopefully more negotiations.
More clarification of the.
Well, more negotiations on the price and on what we can do for the upkeep on that and the improvements. So I think that there is room for negotiations on that. And I'd like to see negotiations go forward on that before before it's done, see what we can do. So if Elliott
And we need
Michael's
to know
listening,
What the
that's fine.
building needs also.
Exactly.
Okay. Could you have that information, do you think, for us
Again.
for our work session, and we can talk about it? So this is just to get it on our, nothing's set in stone. This is just to put it on for our regular session on the 15th. So, any other comments on tourism before we adjourn? John, would you like to say anything?
Only that there would be, with the approval of the lease, there would be some budgetary actions that would come.
Yes, and that was the whole
Put that in
purpose
the
of
work
this.
The whole purpose of that, so you
Yep.
just anticipate that. really appreciated Councilor Carlson's, creating places that people want to live is really a good theme about livability, and tourism is just one part of that. There's a lot of components that go into creating attractive places that people want to be. And, access to healthcare and good schools, clean air and water, and St. Helens really has a buzz. I mean, it feels like it has a buzz about it.
Yes. Please show up for our city address.
Are we allowed to say any more? Can we make one more
Yeah.
comment? So Jennifer Pugsley again at 50 Plaza Square. I really, listening to all this and putting it all out to RFPs, don't underestimate the years of work that have gone into that and the relationships that are established now. We get the level of
Yes.
talent and stuff because they know when her company calls them, they know who they're talking to. So if we, in my opinion, it's starting at ground zero again because you're gonna establish a whole new, I mean,
Yes.
ongoing relationships matter. So it's become what it's become. It wasn't great necessarily the first year, but she's built something. If we bring a new person in to start at ground zero again, I think it's a huge mistake. I think we're going all the way.
Like, as we said, we did go out for RFP, we did have interviews, and she was still selected. In an open process, she was still selected.
We extended the
We put
time.
it out, we gave people
know.
more time, we interviewed them all, and nobody
If
made it out.
anybody knows anybody locally that would be an asset, please send them to me because there is
I mean,
plenty of
we
work.
tried to get somebody local that could measure up, and nobody even came close.
I mean,
And
if
so, of
there's
course, we're not
somebody,
gonna
I
jump
want to
off
know who they
the ship
are.
That works for somebody that doesn't have enough experience to get it done.
Somebody that has a backbone to stand up to the people that don't like what's going on. I mean, I don't know why Tina didn't go run for the hills.
Having served on the tourism committee, I've seen all of her predecessors in tears.
Yeah.
I literally have seen every tourism director prior to her in
She's
tears.
got some thick skin. She can be a politician.
Does.
I don't think I could.
Probably not.
It's a special skill set.
We need to do it in like July.
Yes.
Right? You cannot, unless Steve is building the DeLorean time machine in his basement, you can't go back and do an RFP that should take January 1st on January 10th.
Yes,
So you have
absolutely.
to do it early if you're gonna do it.
Good point,
So you
Brady.
cannot be waiting on it if you're gonna really do it.
Yep.
I doubt if you'll find anybody that actually can qualify for the RFP, but it might make some people happy, but again, you have to do it in the summertime.
Yep. So let's earmark for discussion on the, 'cause we take the first weekend of July off on the third week of July. Okay? All right. Thank you all for showing up, and our meeting's adjourned.